a lesson. We're now up to the third principle of Emuna. This is probably the biggest obstacle to getting close to the Almighty that there is, the third principle of Emuna. And we will see how within our third principle of Emuna, what we're about to learn is the whole history of our people from the time of Abraham. This explains everything. And the name of tonight's lesson is the 4 hurdles, because there are 4 big hurdles in learning and internalizing this third principle. And we're going to try and get over it. First of all, we're going to identify the hurdles. In other words, by identifying a problem, that's already 50% of the solution. Just like a doctor, if he's got a good prognosis, that's already 50% of the cure, because you can't cure someone if you don't know what the problem is. The same thing, if we know what our spiritual problem is, we can cure it, and now we can overcome it. So with Hashem's loving grace, we're going to continue. We're now going to learn the third principle of Emuna. After remember the last couple of weeks, we learned the first and the second principle, and our first week, just in case this is the first time you've joined us, preparation, learn the basic parts of the soul, really very quickly, 5 weeks all in standing on one foot. There are 3 parts of the soul. We have the basic animal soul, the human soul, and the divine soul. And there is a war going on between the animal soul. Every animal has its basic soul, but the animal soul within a human is worse than the animal soul within an animal, because an animal does instinct. An animal does not do anything negative. An animal does what it needs to do to survive. But when an animal soul governs a human acts like an animal, and a human is supposed to act like a human. But we have above the human soul, the divine soul. The divine soul is a tiny spark of godliness, a tiny part of Almighty, which every one of us has. So the entire war is who is going to govern a person, the divine soul, the animal soul. And this whole war is going on in the heart. The animal soul is in the liver and goes through the blood, permeates the blood. The divine soul is in the brain, because the neshama is housed in the brain, even though it's something you can't see. And now we're going to better understand the neshama, because we can't see the neshama, we can't see the soul, the divine soul. And we also can't see the Almighty, because the Almighty has no physical qualities, as we're going to learn in our third principle of Emuna. Okay, our first principle of Emuna, that Hashem alone did, does, and will do everything. And our second principle of Emuna is Hashem's oneness. Hashem has no partners, and it's only one. Okay, so now you're all caught up with 5 weeks of Emuna learning, and now we're going to start our 6th week, B'ezrat Hashem. Okay. By the way, if you want to catch up even more, you could go back to either emunabeams.com or laserbrody.net and click on the category Emuna Hour, and you can see the past lessons and you can fill in if you want to, okay? So now I just start, excuse me for this little preface, but this is to get everybody on the same level. So now we can start learning together from the same level. Principle number 3 of our 13 principles of Emuna, they were codified by Maimonides, who we call the Rambam, is I believe with complete belief that the Creator, blessed be He, is not a body, nor can any physical entity comprehend Him. He is incorporeal with no image whatsoever. Now, it sounds like the Rambam is very redundant, that he says several times, no physical characteristics. But what he does, he closes up, he guards every single direction, he puts guards in every single direction. Person says, well, maybe no physical characteristics, but there's spirituality I can understand. No, you can't understand spirituality. You can't comprehend it. A human, as long as the divine soul is trapped in a human body, it's like in Kabbalah, they use a metaphor of the princess in the dungeon or the prison. The princess she's in a prison, not in a dungeon, but she's in a tower prison. That's the princess is the king's daughter. The king's daughter is the soul that's a tiny part of the king. This imagery from Kabbalah. Now what happens, I explained 3 weeks ago, that when the soul leaves the body, it right away sees truth, because the soul is no longer limited by the body. So the soul, since it is a tiny part of the Almighty, when it leaves the body, it can see divine light according to how much the soul purified itself in this world. It's something new. A soul cannot make gain, cannot better itself in the next world. It can only better itself in this world. But what can better a soul is when the soul's offspring or the soul's loved ones or the soul's students Okay, the same thing, if you don't have children, having students is just like having children spiritually, because what happens when you have a student? When you have a child, you give a child, and you're part of your physical DNA. A student is even on a higher level than a child, because a student has your spiritual DNA. You give a student your spiritual awareness. It's called das in Kabbalah. Okay, you give a part, and this is the eternal part of you. Your body's not eternal. Your body's going to go back into the ground, be an NPK. Okay, so as your students and your children do good deeds and do things in your name, you could go higher and higher and higher, but it's not your own efforts. We purify our souls down here, and we purify our souls by two things, by doing Emuna and by doing good deeds, within the good deeds. So once again, principle number 3, I believe with complete belief that the Creator, blessed be He, is not a body, nor can any physical entity comprehend Him, and He is incorporeal with no image whatsoever. So what do we learn here? We learn that the Creator defies all description. No mortal human being can understand Him or His workings in any way. People want to understand. Well, see, it's one of the hurdles that we'll learn. People want to understand. They demand to understand God. Sorry, cannot understand God. It's like saying, even more so, if you say a first grader wants to understand what an astrophysicist in NASA is doing. Hey, little guy, you haven't learned second grade arithmetic yet. You're still in first grade. You cannot understand that astrophysicist in NASA at Cape Canaveral. But the first grader has a greater chance of understanding the astrophysicist than the most brilliant of us has in understanding the Almighty. And we've said the Almighty is even, and that's limiting Him, because in Kabbalah we use the term Ein Sof. Ein Sof is no end, infinite. Not even the name of God can describe the light that's past. That already, when we say the word, the God word, when we say that, we talk about the divine manifestation in this world. Okay, and divine manifestations in upper worlds that we know about. But this comes higher and higher and higher. I don't want to go into that, but this is all what Kabbalah deals in. Okay, the infinite. And there's nothing tangible or finite about the Almighty. And that way we can't understand Him. So what happens? Why are we learning Emuna? Why do we need Emuna? Because Emuna begins where intellect leaves off. And by way of Emuna, we develop our spiritual instinct, and Emuna carries up us on a higher level, on a spiritual level. So by Emuna, we're activating our divine souls, and our divine souls is like a radar. You see, if you have an airplane, it goes from city to city with a vector. And this vector hones in on the particular control tower that the airplane is in. Suppose if the airplane is going from New York to Los Angeles, and it comes near the Rocky Mountains, then the airplane connects to a vector in Denver International Airport, and that Denver vector leads the aircraft, an automatic pilot, as it goes over the Rocky Mountains. Just the same way, when we learn Emuna, we connect to a divine, non-corporeal, our brains just connect. We activate the Holy Soul, and it comes in, and we begin to have an inkling of feeling that we can't even describe of the Almighty. And we feel, and this is the type when you feel, sometimes you feel this tingling in your body, sometimes you feel this, your inspiration. You can't even define inspiration. You look at a sunset, you look at something beautiful, you feel inspiration, and you feel elated. And you didn't eat your favorite chocolate ice cream, and it's not your favorite football team that won the game. This is something that you didn't get $1 million, but you feel better than any of these other things. And this is the divine soul kicking in. You get a taste of your soul. Okay. So the way to get to know Hashem in any way is to get to Emuna. And that's why we're learning Emuna. Okay. And it's according to each soul has its own potential. And there's no two souls are on the same spiritual level. That's unbelievable. Every soul has its own level. So you shouldn't be jealous about anyone else. It's just like a tractor is not jealous of a Mercedes-Benz, because a Mercedes-Benz can't do what a tractor can do. And a tractor doesn't take a bride and groom to the chuppah unless it's out in the haystack. Okay, but they have different things. So our third principle of Emuna, where we learn that no physical entity can comprehend Hashem, is regarded by our sages as the most difficult of the 13 to learn. That's why I'm trying to take it slowly and do my very best to make it clear, because what we're learning tonight is the big hurdle in our continued learning. Okay, it's the most difficult 13. And why is it most difficult? Because of 4 hurdles. First, I'm going to tell you about the 4 hurdles we're going to deal with. Hurdle number 1, that is when a person prioritizes body needs naturally, instinctively, and his appetites, but when he does it over the soul's needs. Okay, when you put body before soul, you won't be able to accept this commandment, because the commandment gives a limitation to bodily desires. There's an innate limitation to bodily desires. In other words, I'll give you a quick example. We'll learn it as we go. Someone, heaven forbid, covets another person's wife. Well, his body is going crazy. Oh yeah, no. The divine soul says, you cannot do that. You cannot do that. Okay, so the divine soul puts the brakes on what the body wants. Okay, but many people, they don't listen to the divine soul. They want what they want. What's a little maypo career? Mikey wants his maypo. Okay, Mikey wants what he wants, his oatmeal. Back when we were little kids, that's maple oatmeal. Okay, and Mikey wants it. No, Mikey can't have it. Mikey can't have what the Almighty says he can't have. So the first thing are bodily appetites that are very strong. Very, very strong. Our bodily appetites get in the way of accepting this third command, this third principle of Emuna, or any of the Torah's commandments. Second, a person's ego stands in the way of accepting any concept that the person can't understand. Because what is it? When there's something that a person cannot understand, it's like an admission that you can't control everything in life, and people don't like that. It's difficult for a human to admit that he can't control things, okay? A third hurdle, and this is a hurdle since the beginning of the time, the third hurdle explains all of Jewish history, that the nations of the world have challenged the Jews and everyone else that accept this third principle, because they want to control, they want to be controlling, they want things in their power, and they want to subjugate everybody. And you can see this is the whole game, the nations of the world. They want to subjugate their own populace and subjugate everybody else's populace. They're power hungry. And sometimes it expresses itself in torture and outright attempts at annihilation to prevent the belief in a God that no one can understand, and a God that doesn't have any bodily qualities. And this would happen to us all during creation. And we'll see that too. The fourth hurdle is that since the Torah itself, when people misconstrue the Torah itself uses all types of imagery and bodily imagery, God's eyes, God, the hand of God, the finger of God, okay? And the Torah confuses some people and they don't understand, even when the Torah refers to divine light, okay, albeit sublime, yeah, it's sublime, but it's still tangible. Light, you could be measured on light wave, you could measure on a spectrum, all types of ways to measure light. Light is still physical. It's very, very sublime physicality, but it's still physical. Okay, so now we've learned the 4 hurdles. Let's go back and one by one take them slow. Hurdle number 1 is bodily appetites. How does bodily appetite stand in the way of our quest to learn Emuna? Okay, as we explained in the introductory chapter, in our first 2 lessons, okay, our first 2 lessons of Emuna, that an animal lacks both a human soul and a divine soul. An animal has only an animal soul. So my esteemed teacher, the Melitzer Rebbe Shlita, he quips, he says like this, he says, a cow doesn't understand how a clock works, okay? That the Creator created the cow in a limited fashion, because a cow doesn't need for its job on earth to understand how a clock works. But a cow has instinct. A cow knows that it's time to eat, it's time to be fed, and it's time for somebody to come and milk her. And if not, she's going to be mooing and raising a racket. If you ever raise cows, yeah, they have that. But a cow doesn't add on her hoof a Psycho or a Casio or anything like that. Okay, so all the cow cares is that she's hungry, and feeding time, or it's milking time, and that's it. Okay. But the Creator, just take one step further. The Creator created every creation limitation. The only unlimited entity in the world is the Creator. Either you're a creator or you're created. If you're a created, something created, then you're limited. You're finite. Okay. Only the Creator defies any limitation. It's infinite, as we learn in our third principle. Okay. So we say the Creator who defies any comprehension. He created us in a limited manner, just like he created the cow, even though we're less limited than a cow or a horse or a dog. So even though animals, they can be trained, but animals are trained by conditioning. Animals like Pavlov's dog. Pavlov rings a bell and the dog comes, and when the dog comes, gets a bone. So the dog associates the bell with the bone. Not that the dog is telling, the dog has an instinct. And for example, if an animal sees fire and it's hot, it's burned, the animal will learn to stay away from fire. Animals in the forest, they know to run away as soon as they smell smoke. They don't wait for the forest fire. They're up in the hills. Okay. So animals' training is instinctual. Okay. And that is the upper limits of an animal's soul because it's all instinctual. But an animal cannot learn to reason. Man can learn to reason because reason is within the realm of the human soul. That's part of our job. So now we've got the animal soul, which is instinct, the human soul, which is reason that the animals don't have. But now to activate the divine soul, we have to go a step further. We have to learn Emuna in general, and this third principle in particular, that Hashem has no bodily properties and that we can't comprehend him. Okay, that is what we need to do to override the animal soul. Until we learn and internalize the third principle, we can't override the animal soul. So this is a prodigious challenge because the animal soul is a prodigious gravitational force. What's the difference between physical gravity and spiritual gravity? The animal soul pulls a person down. It's very heavy. It's physical gravity. The divine soul uplifts a person. It uplifts. See, like warm air rises. And warm air rises, spirituality rises even higher. The divine soul higher, it's uplifting. That's why we say something inspirational, it's uplifting. And it's uplifting, that's a proper description, a proper term, because spiritually it uplifts us, it lifts us up. Okay, so what happens? Let's say that let's show the difference, let's show the war. We said the first thing, a person's appetites to get in the way, that's the first hurdle. How do a person's appetites get in the way? And when that body is really strong, the soul, unless it really works hard on Emuna, the soul doesn't have a chance. Because the body in this world, 99.3% of the people in the world, their bodies override their souls. So people say that, right, that's all. You have to understand, the whole quest for power, the whole quest for money, the whole quest for fame, the whole quest for governing, the whole quest for everything, it's all bodily oriented. Everybody is running after monetary pleasures, bodily pleasures, they're all bodily oriented. And as we hear, heaven forbid, heaven forbid, heaven forbid, the immorality in modern society and the abuse and the late movement, it's all because of the body. It's all because of the body. Explain to you why. But let me use acceptable imagery. Suppose a person loves cheeseburgers. Okay, he loves cheeseburgers. So if the body gets its way, that person doesn't want to hear anything that the Torah says, oh, no, you can't mix milk and meat. Doesn't want to listen to it. Why? Because that cramps his style. He loves cheeseburgers. He wants to have a cheeseburger. That's his favorite food. So the Torah says, wait, you can't cook meat and milk together. You can't eat meat and milk together. You can't even enjoy it. Okay, if you have, you make a living, you can't make a living from selling meat and milk. All right. So the Torah overrides the body. And a person, if you want to accept the Torah, he's got to override his bodily appetites, and that is a tough thing to do. A tough thing to do. So how do most people react? 99.3% of people react. Now you understand, everybody here, you are in the top 0.7% of the population just by learning Emuna. Nobody else is even there. This is what a privilege is to speak to this group. You know, if we would talk about politics and advertise, okay, we're going to speak about Trump and we're going to speak about Biden and the Democrats and Republicans, and a spiritual angle on politics. They get many, but that doesn't behoove anyone. That's interesting. That's nice. We're talking about Mashiach and do Mashiach speculation. We are talking about getting close to Hashem, and this is not popular. This is just not popular. This is your mission on earth. This is my mission on earth. This is our mission on earth. Okay, we are doing a mission on earth. And this is why the evil inclination calls up the reserves to give us resistance. This is the heavyweight battle. There's a really strong opponent fighting against us. This is Jacob wrestling against Esau's angel. Okay, so people react. They say, nah, they don't want the Creator telling them what to do. They don't want the Torah telling them what to do. They want to eat a cheeseburger and use your imagination for all the other stuff they want to do. And the Torah says you can't do it. The Torah says in the 10 Commandments that you cannot commit adultery and you can't covet and you can't steal. And you can't, wait a second, person, he wants more money, but he can't do it in honest matters. So he does, he doesn't go rob a bank with a gun, but there's all types of white collar things that, the jails are full of white collar thieves. All right. So what do? Either a person that wants to continue pursuing his bodily appetites, either they deny the truth of the Creator and his Torah altogether. That's in order to remove this spiritual regulatory agency that's called the Creator and his Torah. Or they do something else. They make a new belief system. Wait a second. They have a bad conscience. Oh, how can I throw the Torah away? How can I throw the Almighty away? I'm a son of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. But let me invent a new type of Judaism that enables me to eat cheeseburgers. Okay, so they make a new type of Judaism. Perfect. Now I can have spinach dreidel on Hanukkah, and I can blow the shofar on Rosh Hashanah, and eat cheeseburgers too. So what do? They make a new type of Judaism. They call it conservatism, they call it reformism, they call it whatever, progressivism, all kinds of isms, but it's not Torah. It's not Torah. As we said in our very first lesson, 99% truth is 100% lie. The Rambam stresses this. If a person compromises one letter of Torah, it's compromising the whole Torah. And by one letter of Torah, every letter of Torah is divinely given from the Almighty to Moses. And they say, no, Hashem, I don't want this part. And this is what people do. They invent this new belief system. And this is a classic example of, we said in our second lesson, when a person shoots an arrow, he's not such a good archer or not such a good marksman. So what he does, he takes his pistol and he shoots at a target and he hits a wall somewhere else, or he takes his bow and arrow and he shoots an arrow. It doesn't hit the target. But then he takes a paint, blue, white, and red paint, and draws a bullseye around where the hole is. Okay, this is what people do. First, they decide what they want. Then they build an ideology. Not so with Emuna. First, we ask what the Torah and what the Almighty want, and now we govern ourselves accordingly. Okay, so consequently, in order to straddle this first hurdle, which is bodily appetite, that gets in the way of our third principle of Emuna, they said this is the big. Once we get past this obstacle, it's going to be a lot easier to learn the remaining 10 principles of Emuna. Okay, we have to tweak our body-soul priorities and not allow physical amenities to get in the way. As strong as they are, this is a tough thing, and you know how hard it is to diet, or even a person that has, heaven forbid, a person is prone to sugar, he's diabetic, and the doctor says, don't eat sweets. Well, a person knows how difficult it is. Sometimes they they can't do it, and they'll suffer and do sweet. Or a person has celiacs and eats gluten, and he gets all kinds of problems. Doctor says, don't eat gluten, eat gluten-free. But still, he loves his role so much, and he's willing to be sick in order to get that. But no, we can't do that. We have to understand that we do something that the Torah doesn't want. We make our souls sick. How do we make our souls sick? You cut them off from divine light. And that's no good. For the soul's health, it needs constant divine light. That's the nutrition of the soul. Okay, so happy is the individual that jumps over this hurdle. And this is our job for 120 years on earth, to overcome bodily appetites, because they get in the way of Emuna in general, and particularly third principle of Emuna. Now let's see what happens to ego, our second hurdle. So the first hurdle, bodily appetites. Second hurdle is ego that we all have. So for a person to accept the third principle of Emuna, namely that the Creator is not a body, nor can any human comprehend the Creator in any way, and the Creator is incorporeal and with no image whatsoever. That's why we're not allowed to have a graven image. We're not allowed to have anything. Notice that all the other religions of the world, they all have statues, they all have things in front of their house of worship, they have statues, they have symbols. Not by us, nothing. No graven image, nothing, because Hashem defies any image. And not only that, we're not even supposed to have certain pictures. Some people, they go to extreme, they don't have any pictures, but most people, many in Hasidic circles, some people don't even have pictures of human beings, because a human is created in the divine image, that's spiritual. And when you look at somebody, the way to love another person is to focus on the divine light. You don't do that with an Emuna. When you can feel a person's emanation of divine light coming off his forehead, and a person is connected, the more a person is connected with Hashem, the more a person emanates divine light. And that's why I tell people, you want to be beautiful, you want to be handsome, you increase your Emuna, you reflect more divine light. And this is what you're attractive to other people love you automatically. Okay, so many people have difficulty. Many people, again, 99.3, maybe even 99.5% of people, they can't cast ego aside. They can't do that. And even religious people, we're not talking about religion and non-religion, religious or not religion. No, because there are many religious people that you look at, and maybe they look like I do, and they got black coats or long beards, or if they're the women, they cover the hair. They're apparently religious, quote unquote, but they're still far away from accepting the third principle of Emuna, because they want to understand Hashem. I get questions like this all the time. Why is Hashem doing this to me? Why is Hashem? We know one thing, it's for the best. Why is Hashem giving a person a physical affliction? Why is Hashem giving a person any other challenge in life? We know it's all for the best, as we said in the last two lessons. Okay. Now, let's see what people mistake. People make a mistake between spirituality and ego. The Koznitzer Maggid lived in time, he was a great Hasidic master, lived in the same time as the Choiz of Lublin and Reb Mendel of Rimnover. This was at the time of Napoleon and the Russians, the early 1800s. The Koznitzer Maggid explains that even a person's fear of punishment, this is entry-level fear of God is fear of punishment. Okay, that's low level. The middle level fear turns into awe is when a person is afraid of transgressing the Torah. And the highest level of awe of Hashem, fear of Hashem, people say fear of Hashem, I say awe of Hashem, Yirat Shamayim, that's the way I translate it. It's awe of Hashem. And I say, wow, I love Hashem so much. How can I do something to upset Hashem? How can I do something where Hashem, she's my Father in heaven. I'm his son. I'm his daughter. How can I do something to upset such a loving Father in heaven that gives me every single breath, that gives you every single heartbeat, that gives you every single breath, that you don't take anything for granted. The more you don't take for granted, the more you thank Hashem, then the more you feel Hashem in your life. Okay, so the Koznitzer Maggid says that even when a person serves Hashem in order to enhance reward and to reduce punishment, this is not spirituality. This is self-interest. Okay, because we want to be punished. You know that the Torah says certain punishments. So this in itself, it's a higher level of pleasure seeking. Okay, it's not a cheeseburger, and it's not another man's wife, heaven forbid, but it's pain avoidance and it's enhancing pleasure. And people confuse this as Emuna. Okay, so even if what they say is Emuna, that's fine as long as the weather is fine. If the weather in life not good, in other words, if they're having stormy times, that is not going to be strong enough to let them endure difficult times. So even though, like we said, fear of punishment is entry-level Torah observance, it's still bound up in ego. When a person understands that for his vested interests, or her vested interests, it's better to forego a temptation than to suffer the consequences. We'll stop and think, wait a second, what our sages say in Ethics of the Fathers. Is it worth it? Is it worth doing a transgression, transgressing the 10 Commandments, but what the punishment is? No, it's not worth it. Forget about it. Okay. Now, the Balatanya, Rebbe Shner Zalman of Ladi, who was the father of the Chabad dynasty, he wrote a book called Tanya. It's a classic book of Hasidic thought. He goes a step further, and he describes the difficulty in understanding this third principle of Emuna. Once again, we're talking about our second hurdle. We're talking about ego. The Balatanya explains that a person must first nullify his desires for worldly amenities before he's able to grasp the concept of divine light. In other words, they don't go together. As long as I want fame, fortune, money, okay, we all need health, we need money, we know what to continue, we need to live our lives. But if this becomes a goal, fame, fortune, money, power, good looks, working out in the gym to get my six-pack abs or my 21-inch biceps, as soon as the body becomes a goal, that nullifies spirituality. You can't do. So we have to we live in the physical world, and we use the physical world as a means. We have to have the physical world in order to procreate the human race. We have to have the physical world in order to give ourselves physical nutrition, so we have the power to serve Hashem. But when our orientation is to serve Hashem, then that's fine. But if it goes past that, our orientation is to serve ourselves, our own ego, then it shuts off our openness, our ability to absorb any divine light. And that's why divine wisdom is not perceivable to the human intellect, because it's loftier than anything we can imagine. If you take anything that the human mind can imagine, the Almighty is even higher than that, because the core of godliness is not, ex nihilo, nothing, N-A-U-G-H-T, not, okay, nothing. It's not in spiritual realms, and you think the angels, they don't know anything about Hashem. They praise Hashem, they can feel Hashem's divine light, but they don't know anything about Hashem, right? So the scientific world, now here is the problem of science and religion. Show you how the third principle, it's that the Hashem doesn't have any physical quality, Hashem doesn't have a body, it explains our history, explains science and Judaism. Solve science is their difficulty with us, okay? Science, they have the biggest ego hurdle, science and medicine. The medical world, they're going crazy now because every time they think they understand COVID-19, it blows up in their face. There's never been anything. Okay, there's been epidemics and there's been pandemics, and boom, you see, look in history, but a second round and a third round and a fourth round, and as soon as people think they get over it, there it comes back again. And they think that they know anything about herd immunity, and it proves that no human, and they say antibodies and no antibodies. It goes round and round. This was said many times. If you can go on emunabeams.com and listen to our lessons about COVID-19, the corona in Latin is crown, and crown in Kabbalah is keter, and that is the highest. That's the divine will. And we can see what the only answer for coronavirus is that people clean up their act all over the world. And you can see the same things are happening all over. It's the same denial of the Almighty, heaven forbid, is in secular Israel, it is in America, and it's in Europe, and everywhere else. And that's why people are suffering. So what happens with science? Science has difficulty overcoming their ego. Science cannot admit, and medicine is part of the science, they cannot admit that it's something they don't understand. So you come out with these theories, and they give with this 8-9 syllable words that nobody can understand. They themselves don't understand that. And all based on the presumption that the world, even the Big Bang Theory, that's got a little bit of relation to spirituality, but there's all primordial matter. No, there's no primordial matter. That these rocks and the space came together and smashed and created the earth, and because of the energy, it created a gravitational field. All these theories, it all depends on primordial matter. Sorry, guys, you don't cut it. You don't make the team. Sorry, because there's no such thing as primordial matter. The only thing primordial in the world is the Creator. As we learn, He alone does and will do. First. Second principle, that he is one. And the third principle, that he defies any concept, anything you understand. Science cannot have that, okay? So now what says Torah? Torah says that the world was created, yesh me'ain, that's ex nihilo in Latin. That Hashem created because Hashem decided to create, and when Hashem decided to create, he created a world. And the Baal HaTanya says that everything stems from Hashem's blessed wisdom, not from any primordial matter. That there was once a space, Hashem created space, and there was once these boulders falling around in space. Hashem did all that, okay? That Hashem's divine wisdom is the source of all of creation. And people that they're intelligent, they're scientific, when you're spiritually oriented, you hear people that consider they're intelligent, nuclear physicists, they're not the spiritual awareness of a kindergartner. They can't accept it. Okay, so what happens? The scientists, the doctors, and 99.5% of the population are all control freaks. Because of their ego, they cannot accept the concept of an almighty they don't understand. They are not capable of comprehending. They cannot describe it anyway. It defies any bodily properties. Can't accept that. Okay, so when they can't fathom something that's beyond their comprehension, they don't accept it. So in order to accept Hashem and to connect with him, we have to put ego aside. And that's the second big challenge. So number one, put bodily appetite aside. That's first hurdle. Second hurdle, ego aside. So until we put ego aside, that's also a 120-year war, we won't be able to fathom the beginning of Emuna, beginning of Hashem. Okay, that's the thing. But once we succeed, now listen to this. Okay, this is the difficulty. But here's the reward. In this world, you don't have to wait till next world after 120 and get God Navi. There are people who attained in the concentration camps, in the Holocaust, inner peace. One of them was a Kloisenberger Rebbe, because he was constantly connected with the Shem. And one Nazi officer once put a Luger to his head. I told the story of the Kloisenberger Rebbe's yahrzeit and said, Rabbiner in Germany. He says, what are you talking about? You died. You're in the lager, you're in the camp here. You still believe in your Almighty. He says, I'm the Almighty. This, heaven forbid, this Nazi says. He says, I pull this trigger and you're finished. Kloisenberger Rebbe says, if the Almighty wills that I leave the world, he'll give you power to pull the trigger. If not, you won't be able to pull the trigger. Your gun will jam. I'm made of one things. And at that moment, the Americans entered the concentration camp. And the Nazis, this was the end of the Holocaust. But the Rebbe, the Kloisenberger Rebbe, he was starving. He had inner peace. He had peace because he was connected to the Creator. He put bodily appetites aside. Everybody was clamoring for food. He put bodily appetites aside. This is more important. It was more important to him. In the concentration camp, he ate potato peels. He did not eat the tray for soup they had with the tray for soup bones to stay alive. And they warned him, Rebbe, you got to eat this to stay alive. For his neshama, the Kloisenberger Rebbe, he could, but people were allowed to eat treif in the concentration camps, not the Kloisenberger Rebbe. And so even we see an extreme. A person can be in a concentration camp and be on a level where he or she internalizes third principle of Emuna. The word is inner peace. Inner peace. Because what caused turmoil in the body is the body, the ego, and the bodily appetites. This is where all stress comes from. This causes turmoil in a person. As soon as we internalize Emuna, we attain inner peace. That's it. Okay, so our third hurdle, and this is a preparation for Hanukkah also. Hanukkah is in 2 weeks. Our third hurdle is the nations of the world. This explains Jewish history. Since the beginning of time, the nations of the world and their leaders, they've challenged and persecuted and pursued Jews and anyone else who believes in monotheism and a creator that doesn't have a body. Now, why do they do that? Because such a belief undermines their own lust for power and their quest to subjugate the masses for their own vested interests. Okay, so our faith has come with the price tag of subjugation, torture, and outright attempts at annihilation, like we just mentioned, the concentration camps. This one goes way back to Abraham. We're going back 38 centuries to Abraham. Nimrod, he was the tyrannical leader of ancient Babylon. Nimrod had to establish himself as a deity in order to solidify his regime. He wanted to convince everybody that he's God, he's a creator. Okay, Abraham, he was the first monotheist, first monobeliever, and he was a bone in Nimrod's throat. He says, ha ha, Nimrod. You're pretty funny, Nimrod, but it's not a funny joke. It's a joke, but it's not a funny joke. Okay, so what did Nimrod do? He threw Abraham in a fiery furnace, and Abraham came out unscathed. Okay. They'll continue on all through history. Moses told Pharaoh in the name of God, let my people go. The Almighty said, let my people go. Pharaoh was just like Nimrod. Pharaoh tried to make himself a deity. The Torah tells about it. Okay, Pharaoh would wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning to go to the Nile to relieve himself, and then he would control himself all day long, and people say, wow, Pharaoh's a deity, he doesn't need to go to the bathroom. He would sneak out of bed early in the morning when nobody else was up, and he would go to the Nile to relieve himself. And when did Moses come and tell Pharaoh, let my people go? He caught him in the morning. He says, yeah, you see, you're trying to tell people, we know the truth, Pharaoh. Okay, so you can finish what you're doing and let my people go. Well, then was a joke. What did Pharaoh hate Moses? Moses made a joke out of him. Because Pharaoh, in order to establish himself as a deity, he had to deny the existence, the credibility of an Almighty. So Pharaoh, what does he say? If we look at chapter 5 in the book of Exodus, verse 2, Pharaoh says, who is Hashem that I should listen to him? Mi Hashem shenishma b'kolo. Okay. And Pharaoh says, I don't know him, and therefore will not let Israel go. Okay. Pharaoh says, he doesn't know any God that's beyond bodily comprehension, beyond physical God. Why? Because all of Pharaoh's gods, they were all physical. They were all statues and everything. Every religion in the world has something that they can make intangibility out of. Okay, maybe see spirits, but it's all mythology. So let's be exacting in what Pharaoh told Moses. Pharaoh says that he won't listen to Hashem because he doesn't know Hashem. Well, Pharaoh couldn't stand the fact that it was something in the world that he couldn't know. We see this later where Joseph knew, Pharaoh made Joseph keep a secret. Pharaoh knew 70 languages, Joseph knew 71 languages, because Pharaoh didn't know Lashon HaKodesh. Pharaoh didn't know biblical Hebrew. Joseph knew, but Joseph knew all the other languages. So Pharaoh couldn't admit. He said, Joseph, I make you swear that you don't let anybody know that you know more than me. Okay? So as viceroy of Egypt, he promised Pharaoh, he didn't swear, but he promised Pharaoh that he wouldn't let the secret known. Okay. So King Solomon, here we go all through history. I go step by step through history, but this is not a lesson in Jewish history. But we start off with Abraham and Nimrod. We go fast forward to Moses and to Pharaoh. King Solomon says in Ecclesiastes, first chapter, right in the beginning, verse 9, King Solomon says there's nothing new under the sun. So how many people today have the same attitude as Pharaoh? How many scientists and how many doctors and how many politicians? Okay, they won't listen to Hashem, no matter that Hashem is absolute truth. You know why? Because they don't understand Hashem. I have this right here in the Israeli government. In the Israeli government, there's a law, the Supreme Court has decided, the Israeli Supreme Court has decided that the supreme law is the law of secular Israel, even if it overrides Torah. Then this makes it crazy. People understand why we're waiting for the Davidic dynasty. Okay, even though we live here and I love my country, love my homeland, but the secular politics is like any other secular politics. We don't like that. Now look at, we're preparing ourselves for Hanukkah in 2 weeks. We'll fast forward to the Greeks, the Hellenist Greeks. The whole story of Hanukkah and the war against the Greeks and Hellenism, it centers around our third principle of Emuna, what we're learning tonight. Okay, the Yismach Yisrael of Alexander, the Alexander Rebbe, this Alexander Hasidim, they were in Poland, and 98% of them were destroyed in the Holocaust. Maybe a few got out alive. But the Alexander Rebbe, he says that the aim of the Greeks was to force their belief on the people of Israel. Why? What was the belief that they were trying to force people of Israel? that nothing can exist that transcends human intellect. Anything that exists, if human intellect cannot grasp it, and there's also Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, anything that transcends human intellect does not exist, okay? So because the mortal man, he can grasp everything. And that's why the whole system of the Greek mythology are these deities. There's a god for war, and a god for this, and a goddess for this, and a god for art, and a god for music, and a god for discotheques, and a god for cheeseburgers. Okay, these were all the things that they had invented, all right? They could not grasp the notion of an incomprehensible, non-corporeal creator. They couldn't do that. And this is our whole essence. Our whole essence. We put intellect aside and we run on Emuna. Our whole service of Hashem is service of Emuna. So the Maccabees and a few other loyal Jews, the Maccabees were the high priests, they were the priestly tribe, they warned the Jewish populace against subscribing to the false ideology and the paganism of the Greeks. Now, what happened back then? At the time of the Maccabees, 95% of the population, the Jewish population land of Israel became Hellenists. They assimilated. 95%. Less than 5% remained loyal. Okay. The Greeks, they took control of the Holy Temple and they defiled it. And here, it's a lost battle. It's lost. How do you go with 95%? If you people get 95% of the population, and it doesn't mean that might makes right. It doesn't mean majority rule. This democracy is out to lunch. Majority? Oh, well, the Hellenistic, they're right. They're 95%. So what do? The Midrash tells us that the Greeks made everyone write on the horns on their cattle. The Jews had to write on the horns of their cattle, write on the horns of your cattle that you have no part in the God of Israel. Okay, if there was a cow that didn't have this on her head, that every Jewish cow had to have this. And if not, and the Greeks would catch, they'd kill it. Okay, this was the Greeks, it's crazy. And they made every single effort to erase monotheism, to erase our third principle, and to erase it from the Jewish psyche. And if they would have succeeded, heaven forbid, they would have erased Judaism. So this is the miracle of Maccabean revolt, with the few against the many, like we say in Al-Anisim, and the weak against the strong. They overcame the Hellenists with the miracle after miracle. They purified the Holy Temple, and they found that little vial of oil. In Kabbalah, that little vial of oil is the time that the vial of oil is shemen. Oil is the das. It's a human capability for spirituality, for holiness. Okay, so they found a sealed little vial of oil, and everything was defiled. This was the only thing, and the only temple was undefiled. So they concentrated the temple, cleaned the temple, and it was only enough for one day, and to burn in the menorah. And they would have, it takes 8 days to prepare the oil, to prepare pure oil for the menorah. But it lasted for 8 days until the Kohanim, to the Maccabee, they could prepare a new oil. And this is why we have 8 days of Hanukkah. And what does the word Hanukkah mean? Hanukkah means consecration or reconsecration. So this is our celebration of the reconsecration of the Holy Temple. But it's not only that, it's a celebration of the reconsecration of the human brain, the human soul, to get the Hellenism out, to get the finite business out, to get the control freak out, to get the ego away, to get everything that's standing in our way, okay? And this is the dark side resistance to Emuna in every generation. And every year, same thing, we'll go fast, we explain all the holidays like this. Go to Purim, go to Pesach, it's all Purim with Haman, same thing, okay? But that's the third. The third hurdle is the nations of the world. Now the fourth hurdle, this is a toughie. The fourth hurdle, because a lot of people mess up. Even they make it past the first three hurdles. They make it past sort of bodily appetite, first hurdle. Make it past the ego, second hurdle. They get past the Egyptians, the Greeks, the Romans, the seculars. They get everybody. Now the fourth hurdle. The fourth hurdle. And they open up the Torah and you see the hand of God, the eye of God, the ears of God. Wait a second. What's going on here? But the Torah itself warns. And I'll explain to you why the Torah speaks like that. The Torah says in Deuteronomy 4th chapter, 15th verse, you must carefully guard your souls, for you have not seen any image of Hashem. And this, the Torah said that to the 2 million people that were there for the revelation of Hashem on Mount Sinai. They heard voices, they heard the thunder, they heard the first two commandments given by heavenly voice. They did not see Hashem, not see Hashem. So this is a command. It's juxtaposed. The command, we have two commands juxtaposed, that you should prep your soul very much, and you haven't seen any image of God. Okay, so Reb Tzvi Elimelech of Dinov, in his book Arag Dakala, he explains that this is to show that Hashem doesn't have any physicality or any physical that by attributing any physicality to Hashem, this is dangerous to body and soul. So the Torah warns you, take care of your body, take care of your soul, and don't attribute any physicality to Hashem. So if so, we ask ourselves, then why does the Torah itself, Torah warns that, Torah turns around and uses bodily imagery. This is where people mess up. They don't understand Torah, and they take Torah at face value as if they can understand Torah. And the Torah, for example, in Exodus 15 says, your right hand, or the eyes of Hashem in Deuteronomy. Okay, the prophets go further, and the prophets give basic characteristics of Hashem, like they say Hashem, sitting and standing. But Isaiah the prophet, he says like this. He says, the heaven, he says the name of Hashem, the heaven is my throne, and the earth is my footstool. And where's the house you're going to build for me? The Beis HaMikdash. Sounds like Hashem is talking. He stands, he sits, and whatnot. But then the same prophet Isaiah, at chapter 66, he says, for all these things that my hand has made. Okay, this is a small sample, all right? It turns around, and the Torah, what's going on here? What's going on here? Torah in Tractate Bracha says the Torah has to speak like that. Because if the Torah cannot speak in imagery, we can't understand. We can only understand bodies. So the Torah in thinking, when you learn, this is one of the first things when a person learns, if a person doesn't know this third principle of Emuna, that there's no corporeal, physical properties to Hashem, whatever, he's going to blow himself up if he picks up Kabbalah. This one thing in learning genuine Kabbalah that rabbis teach, they stress this and stress this and stress this, and you learn this to come out of your ears, okay, because otherwise they can't do. So the same prophet Isaiah that used the humane language, he says in chapter 40, he says like this, to whom then will you liken me? Who can be my equal, said the Holy One. So Isaiah says the everlasting God, Hashem, he doesn't ever weaken, doesn't tire, and his wisdom defies all investigation. So once we have to understand that we are human, we understand human language, and human language is finite, so the Torah has to speak to us in a language we understand, just like you speak to a baby in a language that the baby understands. All right, but once we internalize the fact that Hashem is beyond our understanding and defies any bodily or physical characteristics, we not only jump over this fourth hurdle, but now we make a giant leap in strengthening Emuna. And this is the Emuna that our ancestors lived by and fought for the last 38 centuries, ever since Abraham. Beloved brothers and sisters, we should all succeed in internalizing the third principle of Emuna and get close to Hashem, and you'll see inner peace, you'll see happiness, you'll see all your heart's wishes answered for the very best. Amen.